Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. My name is Ty Patton. Closing out the wild card weekend is a battle that features the 11-5 Seattle Seahawks visiting the NFC East champion Philadelphia Eagles, who come in with a record of 9-7. The Eagles come in as a 1-point favorite, as this line has moved from Seattle being a 1-point, then a 2-point, then back to Philadelphia being a 1-point favorite, and the total has fell from 46 to 45 points. Before we unpack this game, I want to share the numbers that are fantasy relevant to the Showdown contest itself. There were 121 Showdown contests throughout the 2019 NFL season. And I do want to mention, going forward, what I'm going to do is I'm going to still keep the regular season Showdown numbers, and I'm also going to have a playoff chart and see if there's any comparisons there when we come back next week for the divisional round of the playoffs. So there were 121 Showdown contests throughout the 2019 NFL season, and that includes last Sunday's Seattle-San Francisco game as well. These Showdown contests have an average winning score of 132.10, with an average winning captain score of 42.67. Since the average captain score represents 32% of the average winning score, I focus a lot of attention to the captain's position. With that being said, the captain's position breaks down as follows through 121 contests. The underdog running back has been the captain in the winning lineup 23 times for 19%, and we can add one more to that with Derrick Henry last night, obviously. The favorite quarterback has been the captain in the winning lineup 22 times for 18%. The favored wide receiver has been the captain in the winning lineup 21 times for 17%. The favored running back 16 times for 13%. The underdog wide receiver has been the captain in the winning lineup 15 times for 12%. The underdog quarterback has been the captain in the winning lineup 9 times for 7%. The favorite defensive special teams has been the captain in the winning lineup 6 times for 5%. The underdog tight end 3 times for 2%. The underdog kicker has been the captain in the winning lineup 2 times for 2%. The favorite tight end has been the captain in the winning lineup 2 times for 2%. And the underdog defensive special teams has been the captain in the winning lineup 2 times for 2%. Now, I also combine this by just position, whether they were favored or the underdog, and it breaks down as follows. Running backs have been the captain in the winning lineup more than any other position, 39 out of the 121 contests for 32%. That's roughly 1/3. Wide receivers are close behind, 36 winning captains for 30%. Quarterbacks, 31 winning captains for 26%. All others represent a total of 15 winning captains for 12%. Another number that I feel is really important is the overall straight-up one-loss record of the winning captains, meaning the winning captains, do their teams win the game? And that breaks down as follows. The captain and the winning lineup, their teams have a record of 86 wins and 35 losses, which is a win percentage of 71%. That means the captain comes from the winning lineup or the winning team 71% of the time. And I broke that down by position as well, and it breaks down as follows. Running backs are 30 wins and 9 losses for a 77% win percentage. Wide receivers, 22 wins and 14 losses for a 61% win percentage. And quarterbacks, 23 wins and 8 losses for a 74% win percentage. Now, will these numbers help us pick the exact lineup for today's Seattle Eagles game? Absolutely not. But what they do give us is numbers that can help us in our overall process and give us a little bit of an edge, which in the end, that's all we're looking for anyhow, is an edge. Some of the main takeaways is the running backs appear in the captain spot for the winning lineup more than any other position, 32% of the time. The captain comes from the winning team 71% of the time. I feel like that's a really important one. It's not 100%, but 71% is a pretty big number. So when I'm looking at my captains, I try to focus on players from the team that I think is going to win. And running backs, as I mentioned, running backs combined for 1/3 of the winning lineup. So those are just some of the main takeaways. And the underdog running back has been the captain in the winning lineup more than any other position, 19% of the time, so almost 1/5. So those are some of the main takeaways from those numbers that I factor into my overall process. And my overall process involves, first, I have to take a stand. Who do I think is going to win the game? How are they going to win the game? Is it the rushing matchup, the passing matchup? I factor all those matchups. I look at the wide receivers, cornerback matchups, previous matchups, especially if they've been in that year, and I look at those in the games, and I develop a pool of players that I feel support that team winning. From that pool of players, I select a few that I think have the path to being the highest scoring by looking at past results and again looking at the matchups in this particular game. And I filter it out, and I usually try to get 4 from the team that I think is going to win, and 2 from the team, at least 1 from the team that I think is going to lose. And what I do is I build my lineups around those captains. Obviously, I correlate it. I do things like if I have a quarterback in the captain spot, I like to have 2 targets in the flex spot. If I have a wide receiver in the captain spot, I like to have the quarterback in the flex spot. Obviously, the wide receiver is not going to go off without his quarterback throwing him the ball. And those are some of the rules that I use. And I've never won one of these contests. I have cashed in a really high percentage. I'm ahead as far as what I've played in my return on investment. But I believe in my process, and I know that I'll one day take one of these down. And I'm going to keep building on these numbers, keep them, and I believe these numbers do give me an overall edge. Now, in this game in particular, it has a lot of interesting matchups as Philadelphia has been devastated by injuries. They've lost wide receiver Alshon Jeffrey, wide receiver Deshaun Jackson, wide receiver Nelson Aguilar. So their top 3 receivers are gone. Now they are dealing with an injury to Zach Ertz. Now he's supposedly coming back, and we'll see. But this guy's coming back from a cracked rib and a lacerated kidney. I don't know if he's going to be out there as a decoy or if he can really give it a go. If he takes one shot, is he out? I have more interest in Dallas Goedert. Obviously looking at ownership numbers, it looks like a lot of people feel the same way. I don't know what we can get out of Ertz. Obviously, one of the ways to attack Seattle is by the tight end position. So if he was healthy, it'd be a no-brainer to have, Zach Ertz maybe in the captain's spot, if not at least in the flex spot. I just don't know what we're going to get out of Ertz. Now, on the other side of the ball, the Seahawks have been decimated by injuries to the running back position. They lost Chris Carson, they lost Rashard Penny to injuries, and the Seahawks brought back Marshawn Lynch last week. He'd been sitting on the couch since October of 2018. He didn't play too bad against San Francisco. Punched one in from a yard out. I don't know that Marshawn Lynch is going to give you 25 carries and 100 yards, but he was viable. And they also promoted rookie 6th-round pick Travis Homer to the starting running back. So Homer is the starting running back, and Lynch is the backup. That's how it was last week. This week, I think Lynch actually gets more carries, and Homer will be more of a third down because Lynch isn't getting any of the passing game work. And they did target Homer a few times last week. And before week 15, Homer had only had 1 carry the entire season, and I think that was from a special teams fake punt play. So I look for that. I look for them to try to get – Seattle wants to run the ball. I look for them to try to get Lynch going. I don't think it's going to happen. Philadelphia's pretty stout against the running back position, but they are weak in the passing game, defensive passing game. They're very weak. They have a number 29 DVP versus the wide receiver position, but a number 7 versus the running back. So I look for Russell Wilson to be putting the ball in the air. Last week against San Francisco, he threw the ball 40 times, and I look for something similar this week. That's how you attack um, Philadelphia. The Seahawks on the defensive side of the ball have been exposed at many different positions. Um, they're number 19 versus the running back, number 18 versus the wide receiver, and they have a glaring weakness, as I already mentioned, covering the tight end, as they have a number 31 DVP versus the tight end position. They funnel a lot of targets to the tight end. So Goddard or Ertz or both, those two players are very interesting today. And with the players that Wentz has to choose from, I mean, his number one wide receiver this week is a converted college quarterback, Greg Ward, and he's been targeted, I believe, like 33 times in the last 3 games, or last 2 games. He's gotten a ton of targets, obviously by default. But if Goddard and Ertz can give them something, I look for a lot of. I wouldn't be surprised if over 20 or more targets went to those two, between the two of them in this game. Ideally, Philadelphia would like to get the running game going with Sanders, Boston Scott, and Jordan Howard. So that's a kind of difficult position to pick apart. Sanders twisted his ankle in the game last week versus the Giants. Howard is coming back from injury. Peterson, the coach, said that he was going to be more involved this week. And then Boston Scott had a huge game last week when Sanders went down. He had 3 touchdowns in that game versus the Giants, in a game that they had to have. So it's a three-headed running back committee. I don't really know what to expect out of that. So, but if they are able to get the running game going, that would take a little bit of the pressure off of Wentz having to rely on these wide receivers, and maybe open up things a little bit more for the tight ends. They do run the double tight end a lot. There's another guy, Joshua Perkins, who's been filling in at tight end in the double tight end when Zach Ertz was out with Goddard. He can also be used as well. And obviously, Seattle wants to run the ball, but Philly, as I mentioned, is very stout versus the run, and Russell Wilson could be looking, as I mentioned, at another game where he's going to put the ball in the air 40-plus times. These two teams did meet in Week 12. Seattle visited Philadelphia. The score was 17-9. Seattle won the game. In that game, though, Seattle had Chris Carson and Rashard Penny. And it's interesting to mention that even though he had Penny and Carson in the game, he still threw 25 passes. I think this game will have more scoring, and I expect both quarterbacks to go to the air to take advantage of the weaknesses on defense. That's how I think it'll play out. I definitely don't think Seattle's going to be able to get their running game going. Russell Wilson is a very efficient quarterback, and I think that's what the game is going to come down to. That's why I feel like there'll be more scoring. There could also be a few more turnovers because of that as well. I'll be honest, I am not sure of the winner of this game, but I'm going to lean towards Seattle in a close one. And I'm going to build my lineups with that in mind. So with that being said, this is a lineup that I like. In the captain's position, I'm going to go with Goddard. Now, I know I said I usually try to put the captain from the team that I think is going to win. But I like Goddard because of the volume that I think he's going to get. And I'll show you something with this lineup. Arcega-Whiteside, he allows me to, he's only 2,200. He's actually the number 2 wide receiver. I have a little bit of interest in him because Greg Ward's going to get a lot of ownership. So I think Arcega-Whiteside could be sneaky and a nice pivot off of Greg Ward. I'm going to go with the kicker Myers. I'm going to go with wide receiver DK Metcalf. Metcalf has a really good matchup. His matchup's better than Lockett. They actually both have really good matchups. I just feel like Metcalf's like Whiteside, a nice pivot off of Lockett, a higher owned Lockett. And then I'm going to put both quarterbacks in here. That left 800 on the table. I really like this lineup. Another way I could, if I wanted to go with strictly the team that I think is going to win, I could actually go this way and come down, and I still get Goddard in there and leave 400 on the table. So that's using the numbers that I showed you guys. It's 71%, so there's 29% of the time the captain comes from the losing team. I just think that Goddard can have a big game and Philadelphia can still lose the game. He's going to get a lot of targets today, especially if Ertz is just out there as a decoy. And so that this lineup leaves 400 on the table. I have wide receiver from Seattle stacked up with Wilson. I got Wentz and Goddard stacked up together, and another target for Wentz and Arcega Whiteside. I left 400 on the table. Got the kicker from the team with the well, they're not the favorite now. They started out as a favorite. The team that I think is going to win the game. I generally go with the kicker that I think is going to win the game because they have a higher implied total if they're favored. This is virtually a pick game. You can't go wrong with either one of these kickers. Really good kickers, both of them. You could actually pop the other one in here too. Kickers offer a safer floor, and I generally try to use only one of the between the two kickers and two defensive special teams. I try to only use one, at the most two of those four. And as I mentioned, kickers offer a safer floor. I like to target the kicker from the team with the highest implied total. Just makes sense if they're going to score more points. I'm going to use the kicker from that team. And teams that are playing from behind, especially if it's more than 3 points, aren't running their field goal kicker out there to kick field goals, especially if they get way behind. Then you see your kicker get phased out because the team is going for 2 points and all that. So, but this is a lineup that I like a lot, and I do like to flip Goddard up here and with Metcalf down here, and that leaves money on the table, and that's a good thing during the showdown contest. The average winning lineup, I seen this number the other day. I check it weekly from a paid site that I use. The average winning lineup is leaving just over $1,000 on the table in the large GPP tournaments. So this is a sample of a lineup that I'm working with, utilizing the numbers that I shared with you guys. And like I always do, I utilize an optimizer. Whether I'm building lineups for a main slate, showdown, I like to use an optimizer because I want to see the different randomizations of the players that I like. And if I'm building manual lineups across different contests, I'm probably not going to see every possible randomization. So what I do is I utilize an optimizer from a paid site, and I set it for 150 lineups. On Showdown, I only use a few rules because I want to see a true randomization of the players that I like. A couple of the rules that I use, as I previously mentioned, I'll put, if I have a quarterback in the captain spot, I like to have at least 2 targets. The only time I don't do that is if I have Lamar Jackson, and I don't mind running him without a target, but I generally like to have at least one for him too. If I have a wide receiver in the captain spot, I want a quarterback in the flex. As I already told you, I try to only use one of the 4 between the 2 defensive special teams and 2 field goal kickers, 2 at the most. I set the minimum maximum exposures. Like I said, I try to pick between 4 and 6 players, usually 4 from the team that I think is going to win and 2 from the team that I think is going to lose for my captains, and sometimes less. And then I set the minimum maximum exposures for those. I'll tell you, in this game here, I had Russell Wilson as my number one captain. I set his exposure to 25% in the captain spot and 30 to 35% in the flex position. And after I do the captains, I go down and I do all the flex positions all the way down. And some of these lower priced ones, I don't think I had Holyfield or Ursula or Swopes. I didn't go that low. The lowest I think I went was Turban, and I'll put that. I don't want any more than 1 or 2% of those in any of my lineups. And as I said, I set it for 150 lineups. Now I usually don't get 150. A lot of because of the minimum maximum exposures and the couple little rules that I put in there, I generally don't get 150 lineups. If I do get 150 lineups, that means one of two things. Either I got lucky and I hit 150 on the dot, or there's way more or more randomizations of the combination of players that I have. But I usually don't get there for main slate or showdown. In this particular one, it generated 128 out of the 150 requested lineups. Now, I don't MME, meaning I don't do the 150 lineup entries. If I could, I would. I'm just not in the position to do it. If I ever get a chance to do it, I definitely will. 5 times this year on the main slate, my optimizer generated the lineup that would outscore the eventual winner on the DraftKings Millie Maker. And I use the DraftKings Millie Maker as my measuring stick each week. But 5 times this year, the optimizer had the lineup that would have beat the winning lineup. So that's why those guys do that. And it makes sense. Now, I'll do the 20 entry $1, 20 entry quarter. Some of the bigger ones, I'll do some double ups, head to head, 50-50, and I spread out my lineups over some different contests, and that's how I do it. Showdown and main slate. And so this generated 128 lineups, and as I mentioned, I want to see the different randomizations of the players that I like and utilizing the captains that I like. And as I always do, I always share 1 or 2 with you guys. I'm going to share the first one that was generated and another one that was generated out of those 128. The first one had Russell Wilson at captain. In the flex position, it had David Moore. He's the number 3 wide receiver. It also had Jacob Hollister. He's been pretty viable. Wilson's been targeting him a lot towards the end of the season. It had the Seahawks defense. It had Sanders, running back. And it also had Carson Wentz. So this is interesting. Now, this didn't leave any money on the table, so I don't know how contrarian or how different it'll be. But you got Wilson stacked up with Moore and Hollister, Seahawks defense. And then you have Wentz, the passing game, and Sanders, the running game. So let's see here. We got a little information here on Sanders. Doesn't carry an injury designation for Sunday's playoff game against the Seahawks after practicing fully Friday. Sanders previously stated that he'd play this weekend, and that's been confirmed by the Eagles' final injury. And he has actually been getting, except for the Giants game where he only got 9 carries due to injury, he's been getting 20, 19, 15, and a lot of passing game work. So Sanders is, if he's healthy, he could be a big part of this game. And as I said, I wouldn't be surprised if this game went either way. That's coming from a Dallas Cowboy fan. I think there's possibility that Philadelphia could win this game. I don't know. Russell Wilson's a great quarterback, and sometimes he can will this team to victory. I don't think Seattle's as good as a lot of people think that they are, but and being injured at the running back position definitely hurts their game script and the way they like to play their games. But this was the first one generated, and I'll be playing that somewhere. So I feel like this is pretty interesting. And another one that it had Sanders in the captain spot, it had the Eagles defense. It had David Moore again. I think David Moore is a number 3 target for Seattle. Lets you do a lot of other things with the lineup. It also had Goddard. And it had both quarterbacks. This is a pretty interesting lineup as well. It left $100 on the table, so it's a little bit different. But you got Wilson with 1 target, and you got Wentz with the target. And obviously, Sanders leading the way. Maybe the Eagles defense doing enough to where I think the Eagles defense would correlate more with Wilson and more of the passing game. If the Eagles defense is doing their thing, I mean, if somehow they get a turnover and Sanders gets going, then I'm not sure how much Wentz and Goddard that you need. But this is an interesting lineup, and this was generated by the optimizer as well. So I want to get this posted for you guys. Hopefully these playoff games are as exciting as the games yesterday. 1 in overtime and 1 coming down to the last second, and really interesting games. And hopefully today's games are just as interesting. It's kicking off with the Minnesota-New Orleans game. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I encourage you to please drop any opinions or comments that you may have below. I try to answer them. Ryan, I seen your shout out to you. Say, yeah, sometime we'll do a head-to-head together. But I really appreciate all your opinions and comments that any of you may have. And if you have a question and I don't know the answer, I'll see if I can find out. Or if you'd like to see me do something else, I'll see what I can do. I encourage you to please share this video, like it, subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and hit that notification bell. My subscribers finally went over 100, which was a big number for me. My viewers have went way up. I went over 6,000 views, which definitely exceeds what I thought this channel would be when I started out. I didn't know what to expect, but it's definitely exceeded my expectations, and thank you to all of you. It's because of you that this has happened, and I plan on making this channel grow and doing a lot more things and making it better moving forward. I will be doing the showdown videos next weekend for the divisional playoff games. It should be pretty exciting. I'll also be doing a 4-game main slate video for next weekend as well through the week. Not sure on the days yet, so if you haven't hit that notification bell, please do so. And as I was mentioning about subscribers, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. It's free. I got some really good information, and just give me a shot. You don't have anything to lose by doing that, and I do really appreciate being able to get over that 100 threshold right now. You can follow me on Twitter at winningabout. Don't forget to check the injury report for this game at 3 o'clock. Especially if you're using like Zach Ertz or any players. I mean, you never know. They might not even have an injury designation and get a flu bug or something, and all of a sudden they're out of the game. And in any contest, showdowns specifically, you only have 6 positions. You definitely don't want a 0 if you can avoid it. So check that injury report at 3 o'clock today and make sure players are in the game. I'd be really careful with Zach Ertz. As I said, I don't know what to expect out of him, if he's a decoy or if he can really offer something to the team. So I'm going to get this posted for you guys. Good luck today. I'll be back through the week to start posting videos on the divisional playoffs. Thanks again for joining me. My name is Ty Patton. This is all about winning daily fantasy sports, and I'll see you again real soon.